And I believe we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live stream. I hope you guys are all doing well. I have a special guest with me today. I have Kevin from Colorado, right, Kevin?
Kevin from Colorado, rose right off the tongue.
Oh, yeah. And we hung out last year because I went to SOCA, which is an organization you run, and I gave a talk there last year. And so it was a lot of fun. And I'm excited to kind of talk about prayer today, kind of having that interior relationship with God. And then, of course, I want you to talk about SOCA because I think it's really important and more people need to know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a lot of fun having you out here. And I think all the Colorado hippies really appreciated having the religious hippie in our state.
Official. I am the official religious
The
hippie.
hippie, yeah.
No, it's awesome, and I definitely think Colorado. I went there this year to visit my manager, and it was packed, but like you said, it was in Boulder, so a little bit more of hippie central than
Does
where
not
we
get
were
more
last year.
Colorado than Boulder, California of the Rockies.
It's right there. So, I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, Colorado is like packed now.
Yeah.
Um, So, anyways, moving on though. So you run SOCA, which stands for Soul of the Christian Apostolate, correct?
Yep. Souls of the Christian Apostolate.
Souls of the Christian Apostolate. Okay, so I definitely think for those who maybe aren't familiar with you and like what you do, maybe introduce yourself to them for a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And I can actually tie it into Boulder. There's a good story I have about all the Boulder hippies. So, yeah, Kevin Roerty, I was raised as a cradle Catholic and nearly fell away from the faith going into high school. If you ask anyone who knew me at the time, I was definitely one on the downward spiral. You can see pictures of me, got the baggy pants and the hat and the earbuds and the whole shebang. I was a punk. And so I hit really a rock bottom moment and just tasted the shallowness of the world today. And I had this experience of God being a living God around that time. And I realized I had a choice to make. Either I was going to be all in for God and change everything, or I was going to reject him entirely. But it couldn't be an in-between thing. And that's what I realized. And I met a priest who introduced me to a path of living out that living experience of God every day through the practice of daily mental prayer or meditation, spending time conversing with God every day. And that changed everything for me. You can ask people the difference between me beginning of high school and exiting high school is like really just a testimony of God's grace. And, I'm still far from perfect, but I'm less punkish at least. So that ended up leading me to go to religious life very soon after that. I was in an order in France for a year and a half. It was kind of a Dominican order, and I learned a lot about the contemplative life there. But I discerned through that I didn't have a call there, and I left and I became a college campus missionary with focus and saw a lot of the practicals of evangelization. But I also saw an opportunity to tie together the source of my own conversion or reversion, which was the interior life of prayer, and what I learned in religious life with evangelization. And that's where SOCA came about. In 2018, I founded SOCA with a couple priests in Denver. And the heart of the mission is to look at all the problems in our society and our world and get to the heart of them. So human trafficking, abortion, all that. What is at the heart of this? A stat I like to bring up is for every individual that comes in the church, over 6 leave. Because we can't just get to a surface level problem. We got to get to the root of it. And that's that we have a huge hole in our souls for God. And the only way to fill that is through the interior life of prayer. We spend time conversing with him daily in what the saints call mental prayer meditation. St. Teresa says that the devil knows he's lost a soul who perseveringly practices 15 minutes of mental prayer a day. But the devil knows, there is no need for the devil to bring you to hell if you don't do this, because you go there with your own 2 feet. And there's a bunch of other quotes that I could ping you with from the saints, but the short of it is that this practice should be integral to what it means to be a Catholic. And I'm on a mission, and our organization is on a mission to help as many people do that in a personal way, personally help them, walk with them, give them accountability, etc. Yeah, that's me in a nutshell in SOCA.
No, that's awesome. I remember going and there were just so many vibrant young Catholics. And you guys just had a conference recently, correct?
Yeah, we had another one this past summer.
Yeah, and so is that gonna be like a yearly thing, do you think?
Yeah, so it really depends right now. Our main emphasis is really meeting with people one on one, and it depends how large of a team we have. But we're going to be having an annual conference. It might be next year online. We might have an online one and an in-person one. We're assessing right now whether or not we should have a big conference. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. And
Yeah.
so we're assessing whether or not we should do that or do more of a smaller retreat type of thing, and then have an online conference that's for thousands of people, which we did in 2020. So that's TBD. But I think 5 years from now, we'll have the infrastructure. We'll definitely still have something like that. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's nice to be able to get like-minded Catholics together, and I linked everything below for those who want to go check it out and, like, look at the website. And on your website, you have this call to prayer. It's
Yeah.
something you sign up for. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So the big thing that we want is just there to be a standard where everyone is doing this every day. So the first step is just asking people to commit to spending 15 minutes a day to talk with God. And so that's what's on our homepage. Everything is geared toward that. We ask people commit to 15 minutes a day, and we'll provide you with what's called our 5-step mental prayer cheat sheet. So we have 5 steps. It's a one-page thing that you can put on your nightstand or wherever you pray. Bring it with you, and it'll help walk you through just some basic steps to get to the heart of talking with God. And then after that, we have an interior path that has kind of 12 steps to develop the habit, get accountability, advance to contemplation. And whenever someone signs up, one of our staff outreach missionaries will reach out to you to see if you have any questions and see if you want help in any way. So that's what that commitment on that page is all about.
Wonderful. Yeah, I know mental prayer is, I think, something that's definitely neglected in today's day and age. And, I talk about it with my friends all the time about how I feel like the occult and everything like that gets such a pull from young people because it has that mysticism in it. It has like that,
Yeah.
that part. And that's something that I feel like today the Catholic Church really needs to push more because I feel like that's not something that they're pushing as much. And I think mental prayer is probably one of the most important things. It's how we become saints.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's just on that note to tie it back to Boulder. So after religious life, I came back and visited my friend who was a student at Colorado Boulder. And for those of you who don't know, it's very marijuana central, and it's kind of a party school. So very much so. And so I was visiting him, and I was at his place. This is like a month after I came back from France, and his roommates come back, and one of his roommates is with his girlfriend, and they look at me and he's like, "Who's this guy?" And my friend's like, "Oh, that's Kevin, is my friend from high school, blah blah." And then my friend's like, "Yeah, he was just a monk in France." And the guy looks at me and he's like, "Dude, you were a monk? That is so sick. Are you serious?" And then his girlfriend's like, "Yeah, man, that's gnarly." And they proceeded to watch Spy Kids, but we talked about like deep things and like meditation and stuff. And so the moral of that is I think that there's a real, monk mysticism, that kind of stuff. There's a real intrigue from people today about that side of things. I think especially in the mental health realm, the Catholic Church,
mm,
the Western tradition as a whole, has so much to offer that's been jettisoned and put on the back burner and really thrown away in our society. A lot of it's based more on like Eastern meditation, Eastern practices. But the Western tradition is not just a matter of emptying ourselves or merely just being mindful of the present, which it's good to be in the present for sure, but just in our senses, we have a spirit, and we ultimately thirst for divine transcendental meaning, something that goes beyond this world. And I think that only comes when you have that encounter with the logos of all, the God of all, of the universe, meaning itself, that helps get us through suffering, not just avoid suffering, but find purpose in suffering, to believe in something deeper, to believe in something eternally good from it.
absolutely. Because I do believe, suffering is necessary for salvation. And suffering without Catholicism to me doesn't really make any sense because our suffering has merit. And I do believe that when people align their suffering with, Jesus on Calvary, Our Lady of Sorrows, they gain so many merits from that, and it makes it this they make it basically makes the suffering so much easier to carry.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of people today. I mean, the rates of anxiety, depression, PTSD, all that kind of stuff. Um, people are looking for solutions all over the place.
Mm,
And there really is one thing necessary that our souls need more than anything, and that is to be filled up with God, and that's where true healing comes. And I think that that's a way to approach people today. I think approaching people that look, we all have a sense that there's a hole in our souls. There's something deeply off that I can't fill on my own. And if we can just get people to be mindful of the fact that you have a spirit, like if I just in the moment, I'm like aware I have a spirit. What am I doing? Am I cognizant of that at all throughout my
mm,
day? I think especially this next generation, they're not going to be convinced of Catholicism. They're not going to be convinced of their parents' religion at all because no one else is anymore. So you're not going to stay Catholic because Grandma Oshpengosh from Poland was Catholic. I don't know if
true.
that's a real Polish name, but it sounded Polish.
Probably.
Yeah.
You forgot the ski at the end. Ashkenazi.
There we go. Ashkenashki. Um, so I think what is actually going to keep people there, they need a deeper motive. They have to have that encounter with like divine love, So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen that at all with people that you interact with or in your own life, but that's certainly something I found.
Absolutely. I've definitely noticed more of a breakthrough with people in person than online. I definitely think online is good for those who are actually searching for truth. Because if
Yeah.
they're searching for truth, they're not going to be biased about it and they're going to actually learn from what you say. But the people who are biased, I see more of a progression in the right direction with them when I actually listen to them, when I sit down with them and I actually listen to what they have to say or what they believe. Because if I understand what they believe, then I know how to talk to them. But if I am just talking at them about what I believe, well, they don't believe the same thing. So, how can I expect to keep them on the same standard that I am if they're not there yet? Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely have noticed that too.
And I think people sense authenticity, and I
Mm,
think that's why a lot of people have certain stigmas around Christianity and Catholicism. They think those people are just doing it for cultural reasons. They don't really believe this stuff. What's the deeper purpose in it? They're just following rules. And
mm,
I think when you have that intimacy with Christ, and we're all by no means perfect, but when you have a sense that you are imperfect and in that imperfection Christ still reigns, like that's a very powerful reality. But I also think it helps you relate to people because you recognize that you are not perfect. You have a sense of your own need, and so you can talk to someone's need first. What
mm,
need you have. You can talk to someone else's need. I was at a bar with my friend not that long ago, and um, this lady came up and talked to us. It turns out I think she was part of the occult or something, but I found that out later in the conversation. But I gradually like she was like, sounds like you guys are having an interesting conversation. We were talking about, I don't know, something about like heaven and hell or something. I don't know. But she was like, sounds really interesting. And then I basically presented the Christian faith from the lens of we have holes in our souls. The only way to fill that is with the logos of the universe, deepest meaning. And we believe that that deepest meaning, the logos, became incarnate, that's God who became incarnate in Jesus Christ. But presenting Christ from that lens, that like he is the ultimate, he is the incarnation of what 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 fills that hole our souls have, you know. It's a new angle. I think that a lot of people, they have a lot of stigmas associated with Christ that it can help bypass some of those.
yeah. No, absolutely. And when it comes to the occult and the worldly things, it's interesting how it's kind of inverted, not inverted, but kind of copies Christianity still in subtle ways. I mean, we have minimalism. Well, there's poverty in
Right.
Catholicism, or there's meditation. Well, we have meditation too, but it's to God, not to the universe or,
Mm-hmm.
they have
You're just emptying
manifesting.
yourself. Yeah.
Right. They have manifesting, we have prayer. They
Yeah.
have fasting, we have fasting and abstinence. I mean, there are just so many similarities because people are looking for something, but they're missing the main piece, which is the logos. That
Yeah,
is what they're missing. Everything else, it's going to be empty without it. And they keep thinking like, okay, this is it, this is it, this is it. And it's like, yeah, fasting is great. Minimalism, great. But you know what's better? Poverty, fasting, abstaining, prayer, because those things have God at the center of them.
totally. They're connected to a transcendent purpose, something that,
Mm.
because I think the real thing is when we look at all that, look, we ultimately die. It doesn't matter how good of a minimalist you are, how good of a meditator you are, how good at business you are. It doesn't like any of that stuff. It doesn't matter really when you die. It all goes away. But it's ultimately supernatural faith that helps connect all of these things to something that has eternal purpose. It transcends all of that, and that's what I think that's the message of hope that we can provide people with, especially when they understand their brokenness already, which a lot of people do. I think when we look at like the mental health crisis that we face in our society, people underneath it all, they have angst about their life and about eternity and all that. And most of what we're doing on the day to day is distracting ourselves from that, but when you can really come to peace with that, it just gives life a whole new sense of meaning.
No, I completely agree. And we actually have a question here. He asks, how can we practice prayer without ceasing when experiencing stresses in life that distract us? And how do we find a balance between spending time in prayer and doing the work and busy things we need to in life?
Great question. Well, there's no cookie cutter answer. I would say first, just making sure we have time set aside for 20 minutes of silence a day is critical. 20 minutes of silent meditation. I think anyone, I don't care what state of life you're in, on an average day, you should be able to fit that in your schedule. If you can't, even if you have 8 kids, or whatever you're doing, like that 20 minutes is going to help everything else you're doing. It'll help you have more peace of mind, and it's connecting you to eternity, and you're doing it out of love of God. So I'd say just get in 20 minutes a day. I recommend doing it in the morning if possible. But so that's the first thing. You can't pray without ceasing if you don't have that set aside time. It's sort of like if someone who plays a sport, they have to be in the weight room in order to be able to perform well. So the same way, you have to kind of work out that muscle of being in the presence of God and conversing with him if you want to be able to do that throughout your day when it's even more difficult, when you have all the distractions and all that. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is, I would say don't think of it in terms of like you have to be just constantly intentionally thinking about God in terms of an active conscious effort, because if you're doing a math problem, you have to think about the math problem. Like God wants you to do the math problem well. And maybe many of you don't want to have to do math ever again if you've graduated high school.
It's me.
There we go. I was really about to say Amber, but I didn't want to.
Call me out. I'll call myself out.
But yeah, I think of it in terms of there's a flame that 20 minutes gets going in your soul. In the sacraments, there's a flame, and it may kind of start simmering out throughout your day. And what you want to do is kind of just add a little puffs to it to keep that flame going. And so that's what the saints would call aspiratory prayers. So maybe find one phrase. You can look up aspiratory prayers. You sign up on our site. We have in our path, we have like 100 different aspiratory prayers you could use, but you could look up aspiratory prayers on Google and I'll give you a whole list, or you could pick a verse from scripture and have that as your anchor for the day. So whenever you have like a brief moment, or think every time I walk out of this room, I'm going to say this aspiratory prayer. And what it does, it sort of lifts your heart and your mind to God amidst your day to day. So yeah, you're going to have stresses. There's going to be suffering. There's going to be physical, mental, emotional suffering that we have in life. That doesn't mean there's not also good things. Sometimes the problem is that we're hyperfixating on what's bad, but that's not to say there's not a realism about their stresses of life. That's going to be there, but can you amidst that still make an act of faith and hope with that aspiratory prayer? So I would say have little reminders in your day. If you could once an hour, have a little aspiratory prayer, or take a break from your work for 3 minutes and just repeat that aspiratory prayer. It'll help add, some wind to get that flame rekindled, so that it stays alive throughout the day. And then the next day, it grows a little bigger in your meditation. And over time, it can grow and grow and grow, so that you're more and more living out of zeal, even though there's going to be dryness amidst all of it.
I love what you said about hyperfixating too, because I definitely think in today's day and age on social media and in our everyday life and seeing the news, we tend to hyperfixate on the negative. And like you said, there is some realistic, things with that. Like life is going to be full of suffering and things, but when we hyperfixate on the bad and we don't equally or more so hyperfixate on the good, it starts running our lives, but it also starts ruining our prayer lives. I mean, the amount of
Totally.
bad things that you can find on the internet today about Catholicism because of what Pope Francis said, what the synod's doing.
Yep.
I mean, it's so spiritually draining, and I think it's more important than ever right now for us to protect our hearts and minds against the news and,
Amen. Yeah.
headlines and
Totally.
everything, and really like focusing on our own internal prayer life with God.
Yeah, I mean, St. Paul says, I don't have, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something along the lines of like, whatever is good, whatever is holy, whatever is just, whatever is modest. Think about these things, in all things, giving thanks and glory to God, in everything, in sickness and in health, all of that, like giving thanks to God, because ultimately, I mean, that's sort of if you listen to like Jordan Peterson, it's sort of the crux of psychology, of our existential like worldview, is, do we believe ultimately that being is a good thing, that the fact that God is and that he created being, he didn't have to do that. If we think ultimately being is just evil or bad, then that leads to the whole despairing viewpoint, and then we're going to fixate on the evil, and that's what the devil wants us to do. He's jaded by being, by existence, by life itself, and so we want to conform ourselves to Christ and to God, which is that there is inherent goodness that's worth dying for, that he died on the cross for, that heaven is all about, and I think that, coming back to what you're saying, Amber, in our Catholic faith, we have to protect our hearts and minds in Christ, because if not, then what's it all for? If we're not, we can't just stick our heads in the ground, but if we realize that our interior life is the one thing necessary, when we die, we're not going to be judged on how much do we know in the news. Did we figure this out? Were we the best detective about the state of things in the church or in the world today? It's like, that's not what we're going to be judged on. We're going to be judged on where our interior, where our heart was. The first commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And so that's, I think, really important. And to have a good prayer life, you don't want your mind in the place in the gutter where the demons are all the time. And so if you can build that habit of, even amidst difficulties in life, thinking about that which is good, that God has given, and giving thanks to God, it really can make a huge difference. And I'm preaching to myself right now.
I know, I usually do that all the time. I'm like, "Oh, am I calling myself out now?" Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Totally.
it's so true though, and I definitely see it today more than ever. I mean, with the amount of things on Twitter, which is now X, I guess, I mean, I just go on there and instantly I'm bogged down. I'm like,
Oh
"I
yeah.
think I'm gonna take a break."
Yeah.
Just maybe forever. But I don't know, it's so difficult, and I definitely think this is the time more than ever to get hobbies, to make good lasting friendships, to get off social media, unless you're watching my content. No, I'm just
Or SOCA.
kidding. Or Soka's content. Um, because we really need to be cultivating those in-person relationships and viewing people as human. I feel like there's this disconnect, and social media doesn't, it's kind of dehumanizing in a way, and it
Yeah.
makes us not want to have those relationships with people. And so I think that's really important too.
Yeah, totally. And that's something that we emphasize in SOCA, actually, is if we're asked what is unique about SOCA, and it's that it's not just that we're passionate about talking about the interior life, or even just providing resources. It's the personal connection of actually helping people personally, and so our missionaries reach out to people and kind of walk them through what is the interior life all about. And that in itself, when you have a conversation with someone about the one thing necessary about the interior life, about how God lives in our souls, and he's alive in our faith, and we're working toward eternity. I mean, it's so different than common small talk, let alone a lot of the junk that's out there, that's so common for our generation to talk about. But not only that, but then we help them get accountability. If you have like 2 or 3 friends that you meet with once a week in person, or over the phone, and then we get together once a month in person. I mean, I've made some of my best friends from this. Like I'm the godfather of two of my friends, like first and second kids, and I've just seen amazing fruit come from when you have that kind of like once a week. If you check in, I mean, it's fine. Guys like, yeah, accountability. I mean, some girls are like, yeah, accountability. Some girls are like, I don't want accountability. Let's call it tea time. I'm like, whatever you want to call it, just get together. I don't know.
It's a woman thing. It's a woman thing.
Yeah. Check in once a week, whatever you want to call it, but check in but specifically about like how many days in the last week have you spent in daily meditation? And then what's one thing you could do to improve? And then usually what you'll find in that is, okay, maybe some weeks it literally takes you 30 seconds. But like in the last week, I did my meditation 4 out of the 7 days, and for the next week, how I can get better is I can make sure that I put my alarm clock on the other end of the room. So I get up on time and I do my prayer in the morning. It could be as simple as that. But a lot of time, you end up, your prayer is a microcosm of your life a lot of the time. So like, okay, the last 3 days, I haven't done my meditation. Why is that? It might be, for someone who's married, it's like, well, my son is this, and I'm stressed out about work. I don't know what's going to come next in work. And I'm trying to figure out, like, we're newly married too. And so how do we spend time with each other, or single people, it's, they're anxious about their vocation, or they just went through a breakup, or they're, they are not stable where they're living, or there's family issues, usually those kind of things organically come about but that community is centered around the one thing necessary. And I think that's so unique. And I just encourage everyone to find some friends you can talk about. Have you been doing your prayer every day? And then you don't have to force any conversation. Usually the personal component will come about organically through that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, they're going to be a dime a dozen, because in my own experience, I have met people who are Catholic but are nominally Catholic. And so they don't actually take their faith seriously, but they still call themselves Catholic, but they'll still do things that are completely contrary to the faith.
Yeah.
And so it is really important that we find those rare gems, and we cultivate that relationship with them, because in the Bible, it says iron sharpens iron in the same way that saints sharpen saints. So, I mean, so many saints were friends with each other. I can think of, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Clare of Assisi, and her sister, St. Agnes. Like, all three of them were like besties. I think besties.
I bet that's what St. Francis called it too.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, he's a hippie too, in a way.
Yeah, he's pretty hippie. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And it's like, he actually helped, I believe he helped them get into the convent. Like, he cut their hair. There was like this whole thing. It was really funny. I was like, wow, they're playing some practical jokes. I mean, not really, but. And it's just so interesting to see, how friendships can really cultivate a good prayer life and a good, I guess, faith life in general. Going to mass with your friends, getting brunch and talking about God, and being able to learn from them too, from their own personal experiences. I feel like all of that is so important and inspiring. I think we need to be more inspired these days. I feel like too many people kind of get discouraged or frustrated with the state of things, like we've talked about.
Yeah.
And I think we need more inspiration.
Yeah. And that's where those conversations are so helpful, because I mean, it's one thing to read something, it's another to listen to something, and then it's another to have an engaging conversation with someone where it's like, I leave the conversation rejuvenated to live out the faith. And if I'm going to be talking to that same person a week from now, or I might see them, hang out with them later in the week or something, like, it just adds another layer of, this is real. I think we get isolated too easily in our society, especially trying to live a devout life. And this helps make it real because it's interpersonal, it adds that connection that it anchors us, especially because I know I'm going to be talking to them once a week about this. Like, okay, I can't just, we're going to do this, hurrah, like a retreat high kind of thing. I've seen it so many times. Oh, here we go. And then 2 days later, boom. Exactly. And I've seen it happen I've seen it happen with priests, really sadly, but I've seen this can happen to anyone, and so even if you're like, yeah, I'm like a master prayer, I'd say, well, I think you may need to do some meditations on humility. But also, you don't know what could happen. There might be tragedy that happens in your life, and then you fall off the rails. And so having a safety net of that accountability really can come in handy. And I don't care if you're a priest or what you are, everyone could benefit from this.
I definitely think that's something I've noticed a lot in the online world. There's a lot of spiritual cockiness, I would have to say, where people are like, "Oh no, like my prayer life is like this and that." Obviously, we have some, real people too, but I've noticed that where I'm like, have you prayed the litany of humility recently? Because if you
You
have,
just like link it.
yeah, just be like, oh, how did that get there? Like, oops. I should though. But I think that's just so interesting because we do need, I mean, as humans, we are social creatures. We learn from one another, having conversations and just being able to connect with somebody. I think it really fills up our cup that we need. And obviously, there are plenty of encounters I have had that have drained me and then others that have filled me up. But either way, it's our duty as Catholics to live out the gospel and to share to people who might not have a good community. Let them know that, you're there for them if they need something.
Mhm.
Obviously, not to the expense that like you're draining yourself too much.
Yeah.
But I think reaching out is important too, because too many people, especially after COVID, I feel like self isolate themselves. They definitely don't want to, and they need like that pull. They need to be like tugged along a little bit.
Mhm.
And so I feel like, I don't know if you've experienced this in your groups, but there's probably usually one person that's the most accountable one who's like, when everyone else doesn't want to do something, they're the ones that are like, all right, get it together.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for sure. I think the sense of that to be Christian is to be willing to be a soldier of Christ and take initiative with things. Everyone has their own place in the church, their own temperament, their own personality, and the way that that fits in, but still having a kind of proactive mindset in terms of how can we share this amazing gift,
Mm,
like the Samaritan woman at the well, where she encounters Christ and she's like, she realizes that he's the Messiah, and he's like, you're asking for water, or he's asking her for, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for the living water that wells up into eternal life. Like, this is what you're really seeking for after like 6 divorces or 7.
mm,
This is what your soul, this is what you're looking for all over the place. When she realizes he's the Messiah, she goes off and she tells everybody. She's full of that enthusiasm for this gift that on the one hand we have now, but on the other hand, it's because it's this enthusiasm for where we're going, that makes us want to share it. And so if we feel stagnant, like that there's a burden when someone hears us say, yeah, we should be trying to take initiative to share certain things with other people. Meditate on that do we really have a sense we're excited about where we're going, eternally, that we have this amazing gift of God dwelling in our souls and we can interact with him, and that's where that, if I think it ultimately still becomes very simple if we spend that time in that intimate contact, in that divine intimacy every day. Yes, some days are going to be dry. Some days are going to be, lovey-dovey. Some days are going to be just kind of steady. But over time, you'll see that sense of being a soldier of Christ, taking initiative, and that enthusiasm will go up like that at a steady
mm.
rate. Day to day might be like this, but over time it'll be steadily like that. And so I think it still ultimately comes down to taking that time every day, just to talk with Christ.
I agree. I think that's a good observation too, because it's always in hindsight. I feel like almost everything is God's providence, how He
Yeah,
answers our prayers. Everything has like a trajectory, and God figuring out what God's will is for us can be difficult
yeah,
because it's really just trial and error. He'll close a door, He'll open a window, He'll open a door, He'll close a window, and so it's hard to tell until you look back, and that's why I love prayer journaling, because I love to look back and kind of see like, "Oh, like, I did pray for that, and this
mm,
is how that turned out." And so I always promote prayer journaling to people because I'm like, "This is something that's really helped me." kind of just view the trajectory of how God wants me to live my life. And that's been something that's really helpful for me personally. But I know people struggle with that. They think that God should answer them like right then and there, like, this is what I want for you. And they get confused because what they'll say is they'll be like, "Oh God, if this job isn't for me, please take it away from me or don't let me get it." Or, "Please God, if this job," or hang on. Okay. A better example is when they ask for something like, "God, I really need this job. Like, please let me have this job." But then God says no. And then they're just like, "So God just wants me to be broke. He just wants me to be miserable. He wants me to
Yeah.
be homeless." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, calm down. Don't
Black
be
pill.
dramatic."
Yeah.
And I notice that so often. And I'm just like, no, that's not the case at all. He's just preventing you from making a big mistake. And you don't see the mistake until you make the mistake. And then once you make the mistake, you're like, "Oh, I wish I'd never done that." And
Yep.
it could be multiple different reasons. It could be anywhere from, okay, your first day on the job, you would have to leave at 5 a.m. and there's a car crash at 5:01. Or it could be as small as your boss is not Catholic and would make your life hell. You never know.
Not that
Um,
everyone who's not Catholic is going to make your life hell, but I know what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Not saying that, but yes, good clarification. But it's like, definitely, I've had so many people come to me and be like, this, or that. And I'm like, well, there's a reason. There is always a reason for something.
Totally.
And I definitely think it's always in hindsight.
Yeah, and I think I was reading this book, The Mystery of Suffering, recently, and it just one of the best insights I've ever found in a spiritual book, because it goes into the psychology of suffering, and it notes we're not a fatalist religion in terms of like, well, we're just doomed to the fate of God's whim, and like we should just not even try, you know? It's also not a Pelagian mindset where I control everything and it's all on my boom, you know?
Mm,
It's really being able to see in suffering, say, I might not suffer this perfectly. I might be imperfect in my suffering and I'm confused. A lot of times we think we're just gonna have this crystal clear, okay, if I just am in the right spot at the right time to suffer just right, it's going to be good suffering. But that's kind of the point of suffering, is that it's not all nice and clean. It's messy,
mm,
like it's not, that's kind of the point of it, you know? And so it's in that where we make the act of faith and hope, that I don't understand it. I don't
mm,
I don't know how this is going to, but I trust and believe in God's will and his providence to make this good, to transform this for something that has supernatural value, that is going to lead to my sanctification, for my greater good, for the good of others, for God's glory. Even though in the darkness I don't see it. That's the excitement of the Christian adventure, is like in the darkness we have faith, but it's dark. That's the point
mm.
of faith, is that it takes that act of faith. Um, so yeah, I think that just goes along with what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I definitely think that, when suffering arises, our first, I guess, instinct is to tweet about it or to post it on Instagram or social media. And I keep telling my people, and I'm guilty of this too, I'm not perfect, but I always try to remind myself and other people, like, privacy is okay. And having privacy in your spiritual life is okay too. I think that's something,
Oh yeah.
when people like us are online, we constantly want to share about the latest prayer experience we had, or what's God's talking to us about. And that's all good, and I think it's okay to do that once in a while. But if that becomes our prayer life, that's no longer our prayer life. We
Yeah.
need to have a private interior prayer life that's separated from social media and the public eye.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally true. And I think that's where having a few friends you can talk to. I mean, I certainly don't share everything that happens in prayer with friends, and it's not even necessarily um, an intentional. Like, I'm not going to share this with people. It's more like, I mean, I don't think a husband and wife necessarily think like I'm going to intentionally not tell my friends like what happened in the bedroom. Like it's
Mm.
just not. I mean, I'd imagine that's not something that necessarily goes to their head.
True.
Like that time with God, you don't necessarily like share that. And not that you can't share some things, because it can be edifying for other people. And I think the way you put it is, once in a while, it can be a good thing. Another thing I would say on the topic of like seeing God's will is, we have this dichotomy of everything is just in control of God's will, and some people say, well, because of that we don't have free will, and then other people, like, it's just all of our own hurrah. I think from a practical standpoint, we should see it's not one or the other. It's, we have to make an effort, but it ultimately is God who is calling us to live and act in a certain way, and it's our response to that. If you really see it as Jesus is calling you to live and to follow him in a concrete way, this could be as a small decision with certain friends, or with big questions of like religious life or marriage, or your work, or in prayer in a certain way. Like, all of these are things that we can discern in our time of meditation. How is God calling me? And I like to go through the 3 categories of, like, the most important thing is my relationship with God. So where is he calling me to focus in that? A lot of times for me, it's like, make sure I spend the time in prayer, and I detach from certain things that might keep me from prayer, and then the next thing is vocational. So like close family, friends, and figuring out where you're called in life. If you're single, figuring out, religious life, marriage, and, if you're married, like, how are you living out your family life? And then the third thing would be like your work and apostolate and other practical matters in your life. And where is God calling you in all of that? And so this is kind of a 3-fold way to go through that discernment, but if you do that on a consistent basis daily, and you talk to God about those 3 things, and you listen, most importantly, you listen to where is he calling you in those ways. It may not be the most exciting thing, but you will find peace over time, because you'll see patterns over time arise. And it's really amazing when you have that sense that God is the one guiding and leading you in your life.
So true. I think, that's just I think that's a wonderful note to end on, because I think it kind of wraps everything up we've been saying into like a cute little package. Well, not a cute little package. You said
Cute
it.
little package.
If
Oh.
I said it, it'd be a cute little
Yeah,
package.
please. We'll make a note that was Amber's way of summarizing.
We'll put yours in a little brown paper bag. There we go.
A
With a little bow
brown
on top.
paper.
With a little bow on top. That's more manly, right?
Oh.
This is yeah. This is my I've had 2 cups of coffee today type energy. But no, I just really appreciate you coming on, Kevin, and discussing this, because I think it's so important and people need to hear this side of things.
Well, yeah, thanks, Amber. I mean, and what you're doing to reach out to everyone, it's awesome. It's inspiring for me. It's good to see someone else who's young out there, fighting the fight. And I encourage everyone, to continue to listen to what you have to say about, I think, a lot of perspectives you have for the young people in terms of how the faith interacts with day-to-day life is really important, because a lot of people, I feel like they don't relate to a lot of other Catholics. And so, anyway, I encourage anyone out there who feels isolated in that way, find a few friends that you can, and make it like a major task in your life. If it's going to take the next 6 months to find 3 close friends that are Catholic, like, make that a significant mission in your life, because it will be one of the most rewarding things you find in life.
I can't agree more. And on where can my listeners and viewers find you? I'll put it in the description, but you can tell them.
Yeah, so SOCAcatholic.org is the website, SOCAcatholic.org. And then we have an Instagram page that we're on a few times a week at least. SOCA, it's at SOCA Catholic, at SOCA Catholic.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I will link those below just so people can find them easily. And I just really appreciate you coming on, Kevin, and hopefully we will have you on again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber, and God bless everybody.
Thank you. And with all of that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. As you guys can see, I have spooky lights on in the background, if you notice the change or not. But I just wanted to let you guys know that our October book club basically ended last Monday, which was really fun because we got Charles D. Fron on to discuss his book, and it was called Rise of the Occult. Really, really fun, and everybody had such a great time asking him questions, and he got to discuss his book. Our next book is The Mysteries of the Rosary by Keith Nestor. He is going to be our guest author, so that will be in November. You can sign up on my website at thereligioushippie.com under the Events tab, and hopefully I get to see you guys there. So with all of that being said, I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Bye, guys.